All right, I think it's recording. That's good.
Okay.
So feel free, like I said, to stop me if you have any questions. That's fine. But basically what we're going to do here is go through the buyer consult,
Okay.
which is where we take the opportunity to set the expectation for how this entire process is going to play out.
Okay.
If we do a really good job of setting expectations, then the likelihood for something problematic to come up is going to be a lot less. It also helps put your people in a position so they know how it's going to play out, what's going to happen, the way it's going to work.
Right.
So it's important to do this so you answer their questions so they feel comfortable and confident about what they're doing, but also so they know what action items they have to take to get ready to make a decision to make this happen, right? So again, when can we do this? When is a good time to do this? When you're prospecting and you talk to someone and maybe they're not quite ready yet, or maybe they are ready. Say, well, why don't we sit down and talk about how this is going to play out? Have you bought a home before?
Right.
Great. I love helping first-time home buyers. Let's sit down so you know exactly how this is going to work and you feel really confident about the whole thing. Or maybe it's been a while. Or maybe they've just never bought a home in North Carolina. Or but they bought a home in North Carolina 2 years ago, but the paperwork has changed since then. So there's always a way to overcome that objection and not to do this.
Right.
It's nice. You can bring people in the office and sit them down at the table and do this and then build a search for them afterwards. Or you can meet somebody at Starbucks. You can go to their house. Or you show them the house because there's somebody who wants to get in and see a house, and then you do it at the dinner table real quick or something like that. It's a way to formalize this process to help them understand that this is an actual thing that we're going to do and how it's going to play out. And this is a serious thing. It's not, I'm not just here to open doors for you. I'm here to be your advocate and work through this whole thing for you.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, fantastic. So we're just going to roll through it. Like I said, ask questions as if they come up or if you have any confusion or anything like that.
Okay.
So I explained to you how, to get the binder, have it in the binder so you can just put it out and flip through the binder, sit beside them and go through it as you're doing that.
Right.
Also, you're going to have that folder that you are going to print out with your information and all the other stuff in there. That way, if they're ready to sign right there, you can just pull the paper right out.
Okay.
So let's do it.
All right.
Our consultation. So we're going to start with a little bit of background about who we are as a company and who you are as the agent yourself, okay?
Okay.
And for somebody watching this, this is going to apply to you individually. Just insert yourself in there. You'll have your own about you version of this. So about Oceanair Realty, we were reestablished in 2017, starting in southeastern North Carolina. So our primary service area, Brunswick, New Hanover, Pender, and Onslow County, and the surrounding areas as well. April of the following year, we expanded the service area to the Triangle, including primarily Wake, Durham, Orange, and Johnston County, but also surrounding. In total, I believe it's 37 counties that we service and are members of their MLS areas.
Right.
Doug founded the company. He's our owner and a broker with us, and brought back the name of his grandfather's company, which was Oceanair Realty, located out of Holly Ridge and on Topsail Island, originally established in 1979. So that's kind of where we are and who we're about. We have a long history in the area, and we have really grown since reestablishing.
Okay.
Then a little bit about me, and this is where you just kind of go through your bio a little bit, just kind of give them the highlights so they know a little bit more about you. Again, in any sales job, it's about building a relationship and a rapport with someone so you're earning their trust and they want to work with you.
Right.
Of course, there's some sort of business associated with it, right? But it's not primarily about that. It's about the warm and fuzzies.
Right.
Right? It's about forming a real connection with them, which allows you to provide that value that we already know they're already looking for, right? So that's that. Okay. And then the next page, just a little bit more about why we do what we do. Well, this is our mission, and it's pretty clear: to provide families, people like you, with the guidance and knowledge they need to comfortably and confidently make a decision regarding the purchase or sale of their home. Part of what we're doing right now is setting the foundation for that. This is a process that's going to play out a certain way. If I do a good job of helping you understand from the very beginning of the way it's going to play out, it's going to alleviate your stress and your anxiety as much as we possibly can. And that's what I'm here for. I've been through this. I know what this is about. I know how it should play out. I know how to tell you what you need to do to make it play out as easy as possible.
Right.
We're not interested in being the biggest real estate team. What we do want to be is the most trusted. That's our vision, and to be the most preferred. I want you to be so happy with your experience that you can't wait to refer me to a friend or a coworker or someone else you know when you hear them talking about, well, hey, I got to make a move.
Yeah.
I want you to be so happy with this experience. And, you know, this relationship, it's not just transactional for me. I'm friends with my past clients. I stay in touch with them. We're friends on social media. We're talking all the time. I hope that's how this plays out.
Right.
How do we accomplish our mission and vision? Well, really, it's our tenets: accountability, setting realistic expectations like I'm doing now and can deliver on those promises. Our culture, being present, putting you first, and personalizing each interaction. No two transactions are the same. I'm not going to expect them to be, but we have a general framework within which we'll work. And value, my job is to provide value to you. I'm always learning and looking forward to give you the best possible experience. Questions about that?
No.
Hopefully you understand a little bit more where we're coming from.
Yeah.
Now, everybody likes to share feedback, and I can't wait to get some great feedback from you after this works out. But don't take it from me that we know what we're doing. Here's some great feedback from some really happy clients that we've worked with in the past. And just for you and anybody watching, once you get a couple of reviews under your belt, I'll personalize a page like this for you, so it'll be your picture and your information in there and your reviews in there.
Right. Okay.
To me, this is the most important page in this entire thing. So if you don't pay attention to anything else, and this is what I tell people, please pay attention to this, because I want you to know how the home buying process is going to play out. Okay. First, right at the beginning is the buyer consult. That's what we're doing now. We're sitting down to discuss what you expect and build your dream home. And that doesn't mean build a new home. It means build a search to help you identify properties that are going to work for you. Gives us the chance to meet with each other, learn a little bit more about where each other is coming from, and for me really to understand your needs, wants, and desires, so I can help you prioritize those and identify things that are going to work. Right. Now, second is paying for your home. It's a big deal. No seller is ever going to review an offer from us if you're not pre-approved or pre-qualified and have a letter from a lender. So before it's time to get out and start looking at homes and get really serious about it, you need to take care of that. And I'll connect you with our preferred lender. They are great. They're answering all of your questions. I usually tell my folks that speaking with a lender is like going to the doctor, except you're probably going to tell the lender more than you're willing to tell your doctor. So be very forthcoming, because their job is to disseminate the information you give them to give you options that are going to work best for what you want to accomplish. Is that a lower payment? Is it a longer plan? Is it to minimize your out-of-pocket expenses? Is it to lower your rate because you can afford to put more money down? Talk with them about that. They'll give you options, okay? But that's important that we go ahead and get that taken care of. And here's another reason why. You don't want to go find a house, fall in love with it, but then you're not in a position to make an offer because you haven't talked to a lender and gotten pre-approved.
Right.
And while you're doing that, somebody else sweeps in and makes an offer and gets the house.
Yeah.
So before we get really serious about this, you need to get serious about talking to a lender and get that taken care of.
Yeah.
And I'll make the connection. I can send an intro email to get the ball rolling once we finish this up, okay?
Okay.
All of our lenders are local in North Carolina. So they're all very used to the real estate process in North Carolina and been working with our team for a while. Next is finding your home. Well, now that we know how we're going to pay for it and we can document that and prove it, let's get out and see them. Now, yeah, we met today because it was a good opportunity for us to get started. But going forward, we really need to take care of step 2 before we get out and see anything else because of what we just talked about. Okay. Right. Now we found the ones that you want to look. What I'm going to do when we go and see these homes is bring market comparisons. Okay. I'm going to bring comps. And here's why. We are very data driven at the Ocean Air Realty. I'll be able to tell you right away, looking at the data, if there's any flexibility in this price, or if we need to jump on this yesterday because it's priced really well. The market is going to dictate what things sell for. not how much the seller needs from it, not how much you want to pay for it. The market is the dictator of that, and I'll bring the data to prove it.
Right.
So we can make an informed and educated decision about how to go forward, which is step 5, which is writing the offer. Let's make our intentions formal. You want to buy this house. Now we're going to go through the process. The 2 of us, the 3 of us, however many, are going to talk about, after looking at the comps, what is a fair price, what you can afford, the other items that are associated with the offer itself, which we'll explore later. I'll fill out the paperwork and send it to you to sign. And we can meet and do it in person, but I also use a great site called Dotloop, which you can digitally sign everything. It saves us time. It makes things that much easier, helps us get the offer in front of the people a lot sooner to give us the best advantage possible.
Okay.
And you'll learn more about that later. Number 6 is going under contract. Fantastic. We've all agreed to terms. Everybody on the buyer side has signed. Everybody on the seller side has signed. That means we're officially under contract. We have an executed and ratified contract. It's official. You're under contract. Okay. So what comes next? Well, step 7 is the due diligence period. So there's a period for what is called due diligence, and it typically lasts 2 to 3 weeks after contract. Okay. That gives you the opportunity to have the appraisal done, which you'll pay your lender for, and to have home inspections done, which we can set up for you with our recommended vendors, but that you'll pay for. Okay. And then we'll get the reports back. Every house is going to have an inspection report that has something on it that needs to be fixed. Old houses, brand new houses. I always recommend a home inspection and a pest inspection. We might want to do other inspections, but usually I wait to get the home inspection back first before I recommend going forward with a septic inspection or a well inspection or an HVAC inspection or a full-blown roof inspection. Okay. And here's why. Sometimes you might not need it. I want you to save that money unless the home inspector suggests doing it as part of their inspection. If you want to do it up front, we'll go ahead and set it up front too. That's completely on you. Again, I'm just giving you options and letting you know what's out there. The due diligence period, we'll get the inspection report back, and then we'll focus on things that affect safety and livability to get fixed. We're not focused on door hinges that are squeaky. We're not focused on the bathroom door doesn't latch. We're focused on visible signs of water damage. We're focused on electrical and plumbing issues. We're focused on foundational or roof issues or big system issues like your HVAC, things like that. That's what we want to focus on, because if we focus on the small things, they'll be happy to fix those and ignore the big ones.
Right.
Now, do remember, again, setting expectations. Technically, every home in North Carolina is as is. Sellers are not required to fix anything.
Right.
Now, that being said, a lot of the times they will, because they're not even necessarily aware that there are any issues, and they understand that it's part of the negotiation to get the job done. Okay.
Right.
But just setting expectations so you understand how this typically plays out. Now, there's money associated with due diligence. You're putting money down to say to the buyer, hey, I'm really serious, or the seller, I'm really serious about this, and I'm giving you typically at least $500, in some cases $1,000 or more, depending on if we're in multiple offers, to secure the deal. The due diligence money is due right away when the contract is executed. So you need to make sure that you're prepared to write that check and that the funds are available immediately. If you terminate, you'll never get that money back, because you're paying the seller for the time to have all these things done, and they can't sell the house to anybody else. Right. So you're compensating them for their time. Now, however, you do get a credit for it at the closing table because you've already paid that much money. Okay.
Right.
Now, step 8 is the earnest period. That comes after the due diligence period. So typically it takes about 30 to 45 days to close a loan, usually closer to 30, but sometimes it stretches out. Okay. So the first 2 or 3 weeks is the due diligence period. The period after that is the earnest period. There's also money associated with the earnest period. Is typically 1% of the purchase price. So just as an example, $250,000 house, you're looking at $500 at least for the due diligence, another $2,500 for the earnest money. So you can expect $3,000 out of pocket. Just like the due diligence money, at closing, you get a credit for the earnest money because you've already paid it. The
Right.
difference is the earnest period, or the earnest money, goes to the attorney, which is the escrow agent, to hold in their account, which they will deposit, and not the seller. If you terminate during the due diligence period, the earnest money is refundable. Okay. However, say we got through the due diligence period and then you change your mind, but then you'd also default the earnest money to the seller, again, compensating them for their time.
Yeah.
Any questions about that?
No. For earnest money, that's set by the seller, right?
Everything is negotiable.
Yeah.
Typically, the due diligence is going to be at least $500 minimum, and the earnest money, a good standard, is just 1% of the purchase price.
Yeah.
You could try for less, but the expectation is that, and that's the expectation I would set.
I'm trying to recall what I paid. I think it was really low though.
It could be. Sometimes the market at the coast, they're not as demanding. Sometimes you'll see offers without due diligence, which quickly get countered. But that's the approach our company takes, and the expectation you should set with your client.
Okay. Yeah.
Also, the earnest period, we've already worked out any repairs and agreed to those, or any cost concession based on those repairs. And either the repairs are being done and we're waiting for the receipts and the work to be done, or we've already amended the contract to reflect any price concession because of that.
Right.
Last step, step 9, we're up about 3 days before closing. You're going to get the final closing disclosure from the attorney and the lender, and that states exactly how much money you'll need to bring to closing. Now, you can't bring a check to closing. You're going to have to set it up to wire the money from your account to the attorney, usually the day before closing. You don't want to wait to the day of. It could delay things. They'll send you their wire information so you know exactly where it needs to go. And going back to step 2, the lender will be able to estimate how much money you're going to have to bring to closing once you have a conversation with them, and specifically when we pick a particular property. But even with a price range and a location, they'll come close.
Right.
Step 10, the day before, the day of closing, we're going to go do our final walkthrough. We're going to make sure the house is still there, hadn't burned down or anything dramatic like that, but also so we can eyeball that everything's in the same shape that it was when we agreed to the contract, and any repairs that were made or were agreed to were finalized. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
From there, we'll go to the closing, which is where we meet with the attorney. You'll sign all the deed and title work paper, and then you'll sign all the loan documents, which is what takes the majority of the time. Usually budget about an hour for closing. Sometimes it's less, but it's good to plan for about that much, especially if more than one person has to sign.
And we go to all the closings?
Yes, representing buyer, you should be there with your clients.
Okay.
Unless you have an extenuating circumstance, and then we would try and get somebody else from the team to go. But that's the fun part. That's where you want to be there.
Right.
And then really, after closing, it's not officially yours yet. Usually takes an hour or 2 for the attorney to file the deed with the county. Once the deed is recorded, it's officially yours and you can get it in the house. They'll notify me when that happens, and I'll let you know.
Yeah.
And congratulations, you did it. Time to get moving.
Right.
So any questions about that?
At the Celebrate, you say, who else can I help?
That's exactly right. Ask for the referral too.
Right. No, I don't have any questions on that.
Okay. So things to consider with buying. Understand an agency in North Carolina. So in North Carolina, there are buyer's agents and seller's agents, and also dual agency. We'll talk a little bit more about that when I show you this brochure, the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure that you'll have in the folder there too, which you can whip out and have them sign. Okay. So just so you understand, as I represent you as the buyer. If you see a sign on a house, you don't want to call that sign, because 9 times out of 10, not with our company, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to talk to the agent whose name is on the sign who's representing the seller. That's called dual agency if one agent represents both. We don't do that because we think it's a conflict of interest. So I'm representing you only as a buyer's agent. I don't know anything about the seller. The seller's agent won't know anything about you. Make sense?
Yeah.
Here's some great questions to ask your lender when you talk to them about that. I'm not going to go through these with you one by one, but it's just there as an FYI. One thing I am going to point out is things to avoid before buying. So once we get under contract, we don't want your credit situation to change at all. So don't make any major purchases. Don't be moving money around between different accounts unless it's for your due diligence and earnest money. Don't change your job unless you talk to the lender first and they don't think it's going to be a problem. Don't make any missed payments or late payments on any of your current credit cards or anything like that that you pay on a monthly basis. Utility, anything.
Mm-hmm.
There are some great benefits of buying. You can read those here. The biggest typically for people is, A, you begin to build equity in yourself and your home, and which is great for generational wealth. And studies have shown that it's the biggest contributor to building wealth in the United States, but it's also so you can write off your interest that you pay in your taxes every year.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some other questions that are related to, what we'll do in the inspections, et cetera. One thing you do need to know is buying a house costs money, and it's not just the cost of the house itself. There are expenses above and beyond the purchase of the house, and they're considered closing costs. So what are those? Well, it's your due diligence and earnest money that we've already talked about. Typically at least $500 for the due diligence, and the earnest money 1%, right? The appraisal, which you're going to pay your lender for directly, probably going to be between $400 and $500. Home inspection, if we're just looking at like home and pest, you can budget another $500. If you decided you wanted to do a survey, you can budget at least $400, and then it goes up based on how big the lot is. The larger, the more it's going to be. At closing, you're going to have to pay your share of the property taxes and HOA dues for that year. You're also going to have to pay the attorney fees, which are usually between $800 and $1,000 with the ones we use. Any insurance fees, any flood zone fees, certification fees, your down payment that you're going to be making, which you'll discuss with your lender, recording the new deed, and then funds to set up your escrow account. So your monthly payment is made up of 4 things. It's payment towards the principal and your interest payment, but it's also setting aside money every month for your insurance and tax bills when they're due every year. So you're going to pay for the remainder of the year at closing, but you're also going to seed that escrow account with a few months for both of those at closing, so there's something to build on. You're not going to pay that bill when it comes every year. The bank is going to pay it for you. So they're taking money every month to build up the account so they can pay the bills when they're due. Does that make sense? Any questions about that?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. So the next step is the professional services disclosure and election form. This looks complicated. It's really not, I promise you. We have to tell you the vendors we typically use for the services that are associated with buying or selling a house, okay? So you can see the service type on the left-hand side and the provider on the right-hand side. I'll know when we go under contract who you want to use and who you don't, and I'll pre-populate this for you so we can get the information over to our closing manager, and she can do things like set up the closing with the attorney and set up the various inspections, etc. Any questions?
No, I got that. I don't have that page for some reason.
Okay. I'll double check and make sure that you have it. This next thing is a brochure we're required to share with you. It's just based on home inspections in North Carolina. It's a good FAQ, questions and answers on home inspections. So I would just say read through that. Make sure you feel comfortable with it. Let me know if you have any questions. You're going to need insurance for a home unless you're paying cash and opt not to do it. Your lender's going to require that you do it. At the coast, the company we recommend is SFI. It's a great time to shop your car insurance and any other insurance you have as well. So you might as well give Amanda a call. She's great. She's helped a ton of our clients. This is just some information from her. Once we pick the house and you go under contract, give Amanda a call and get a quote from her. And you might decide to go with your own folks, but we recommend SFI. They do a good job. A home warranty is something that sometimes a home seller will provide as part of the deal, or we might ask for them to provide. This is some good info about why you should choose to get a home warranty, especially if we can get the seller to pay for it. It's always good to help you overcome any unexpected costs in the first year. So this is just some heads up about that. And then here are their options and what they are include. I usually recommend asking for $600 towards a home warranty, and then usually that's more than enough that you need from the seller, and then you can personalize it if there are other things that you want to add. We can talk about that a little bit later, but just wanted to make sure that you have that info. I touched really briefly earlier on working with real estate agents in North Carolina and the different types of agency. Here's a brochure about that, which you can pull out of your folder right now, and I'm going to explain to you what this is. Here's the thing. The state requires that I give this to you and that you sign it as evidence that I explained it to you and gave it to you. It's not a contract or anything like that. I can just lose my license if I don't give this to you. So here it is. And this is what's included. You unfold it, you say, seller's agent. Remember what we talked about? The agent on the sign, that's the agent representing the seller. You don't want to talk to them. You want to talk to me, who's your buyer's agent. Otherwise, you could be in a dual agency situation where you've got one agent representing the buyer, you, and the seller at the same time. That's called dual agency. We don't practice that on our team. We feel like it's a conflict of interest. You want to stick with me as your buyer's agent. That way, only I know your info. None of it's getting shared with the seller. Make sense? So you understand that? Any questions? Go ahead and sign and date here. And then you'll do it, and you'll tear off that piece that they sign and keep it, and just put the brochure back in the file folder.
Is it like just like a perforated edge on it?
It is. Yep. Tears right off. Grab some next time you're in the office, and some folders too. So a little bit more about buyer agency and what I'm doing. Buyer agency is a benefit to you, and a lot of people don't know this. This is what my buyer agency agreement with you, which we're going to discuss in a moment, is saying that I'm going to do. I'm going to give you my loyalty. I'm acting in your best interest, which you can't do if you're representing a buyer and a seller in the same transaction. Obedience. I'm following your lawful instructions. This is about you. It's not about me, but I'm your guide and your expert to help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. Disclosure. I'm going to tell you everything I can about the property. I would never hold back any information just because I want you to buy the house. My business, my company's business, my reputation is way more important than any one transaction. So I'm going to give you everything I can find out about it. Okay. Confidentiality, and this is where the dual agency thing comes into play. I'm not going to disclose any facts to the seller or their agent that you haven't told me I'm allowed to disclose. That might be the price you're really willing to pay, not what you said in the initial offer, anything like that. Accounting and dealings, that's why we use dot loop. Everything is tracked, time and date stamped, and we're going to make sure that everything goes exactly where it's supposed to go with regard to your due diligence and earnest money. Reasonable skill and care. I'm licensed by the state of North Carolina, and I do continuing education every year to be able to provide this service to you, which is complimentary, by the way, because the seller pays the buyer agent commission in North Carolina. So you'll never pay me anything.
Right.
And the reason that sellers do that is because they want a professional working on both ends of the transaction to make sure that it goes through. It's not hard to get a home under contract. It's hard to get a home closed. When a seller is willing to pay a buyer agent commission, it's because they're saying, I want professionals involved on both sides to make this happen. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So here's our buyer agency agreement. This is the document that we'll sign, which says we're going to work together. I'm going to do everything I just said, and you want me to do that. Now I'm going to hit the high points. You can certainly read it on your own if you're concerned, but what I can tell you is that every buyer signs this form that works with an agent in the state of North Carolina. It's approved by the North Carolina Association of Realtors. It's a standard form. You can see standard form 201, and it's updated every year in July. The high points are date here that we're signing it, and between you and the firm. It's technically between the firm and not just me individually as an agent. That's standard. Mm-hmm. We're going to be doing this for residential property for the areas that we cover, the regional and triangle MLS geographic and service areas. Okay. Our duration of agency is typically for 6 months. You can move that up or down depending on what their timeline is. If you get real big pushback, you can say, well, we can just sign it for a week and see how it goes, and then we can extend it or something like that.
Exactly.
3 to 6 months is our baseline.
Yeah.
Compensation of the firm, we're not charging you a retainer, so you're not paying me again. And this just says this is the range that's typically paid by the sellers, which is disclosed in MLS. Again, you're not paying that. Now, however, if you're interested in a for sale by owner and the owner has chose not to work with an agent and they're not protecting the buyer agent, then you would be responsible for a commission of 3% for me out of your pocket if you decide to do that.
Okay.
We sign an initial every page. So again, we don't require that you get a home warranty. This is saying that I've given you these documents that are in the folder I just gave you. There are no additional provisions. On this page, you will initial the first box because you're allowing our firm to serve as a dual agent, but no agent. This just says if you're interested in buying one of our listings, that the agent that's representing the seller can continue to represent the seller, and I'll represent you. It's still not dual agency because you don't have one agent working with both parties.
Right.
And then we basically sign on the last page, and that's it. Any questions about that?
Nope. That's pretty straightforward.
Moving on to the next one, pardon me, is the offer to purchase. So this is the big boy. This is the one that says, hey, we're really serious about this, and we're ready to buy your house. And we're going to put all the terms and conditions that we're offering in here to let you know that this is what we want to make happen. So, and the first page is where the majority of the info is, but I'm going to point out other things throughout. Really simply, you got the seller on the first line, and then you as the buyer here on the second line. The address of the property, and then the legal description, the way it's listed in the tax records, will go here. The first line is the offer price. So we're going to look at the comps, and we're going to say, okay, based on that, based on what we want, this is how much we're offering for the house. The second line is that due diligence amount that we talked about. And remember, probably a minimum of $500, could be more than that, okay? And note here it says, delivered to seller by the effective date. That's the date that all parties have signed the contract. Again, it's due right away. The third line is that earnest money, okay? That goes to the attorney, typically 1%. We're going to check personal check here because it's fine for a personal check, and we're going to check within 5 days of the effective date of this contract. You've got 5 days, so a little bit more time to get the earnest money in, but still due right away, basically, okay?
Now, on the earnest money, I would have, until I get done with those other two classes, I would have to have somebody else take that, correct?
Ideally, you're never going to touch either one of these checks.
Okay.
Either your buyer is going to drop the check off in the mailbox of the house that you're buying or at the agent's office, okay? Or just ask the agent if it's okay if they mail the check to the agent's office or to the seller, okay? Just understand that if they're going to do that, they need to overnight it and get a tracking number.
Mail tracking number. Okay. Got it.
With the earnest money, they can just drop it off or mail it to the attorney because you've got the extra time there.
Yeah.
Ideally, you don't want to ever touch the checks.
Right.
However, what you do need is images of the checks.
Yeah.
So when they write them out, say, I need you to snap a picture because I need to share it with the other agent and the attorney and the lender, and I need it for my file.
Right.
So make them out X way, take a picture, send it to me, and then you add it to the loop.
Okay.
So that top amount minus these other two amounts, because you're getting credit for them, this is the amount that's due at closing. Make sense?
Yes.
And we're going to initial and everything every page.
Yeah. And now if there's, let's see. Additional earnest money. If there is a, so let's say that they offer $200,000 and they're using FHA. They want 20% down, so they're getting, they have to pay $20,000 additional for the loan to value.
Yeah, we're not on that page there.
Okay, we're not there yet. Okay. Okay.
So this is just the purchase price minus the earnest money and the due diligence money, and that's the total you put here.
Gotcha. Okay.
For this, there are typically 3 things that you want. And when you get in MLS, you'll have access to Realist. And if it's not an MLS listing, you can pull it from Realist. You're going to want the lot or the unit number. You're going to want the subdivision. And then you're going to want the legal description, which will be in there and it'll be obvious. And then the PIN number or the PID number.
Okay.
You only need 3. You don't need all of these, but
Right.
at least put 3. And those are typically the 3 that we want.
Okay.
On the next page, it just talks about the due diligence and the earnest money. We've already talked about that. What we are putting here is the escrow agent, which is typically our closing attorney. Okay.
Yeah.
At the coast, we have one in Surf City, we have one in Jacksonville, we have one in Wilmington. In the Triangle, we're basically just going to use one who's out of Raleigh. So basically, you're leading the ship on that. Unless they have somebody they specifically want to use, you're just going to populate who it's appropriate to use in there. Okay. And then that's who they make out the earnest money check to.
Mm-hmm.
The due diligence period, that's where you put the date here. Again, typically 2 to 3 weeks. Usually try and get 3 weeks, but if you're in multiple offers, you want to try and get it closer to 2 to give yourself every advantage you can. And then the settlement date goes here. So, it's going to be around 30 days. but you want to ask the buyer when they're able to close. You want to ask the lender when they're able to close. You want to ask the listing agent, well, when would your folks like to close? And, most time it's as soon as possible, but it's not always, and that can be a determining factor in getting your offer accepted. So you're always going to want to win the other agent over first. You're not just going to send in an offer without talking to the agent. You'll be like, hey, Bob, just wanted to let you know, yeah, we are making an offer, and I hope we can work together. Just as a question, anything I need to know about your seller situation, they have a specific time frame or anything like that works best for them, because my folks are flexible.
Right.
So that's how you do that.
Okay.
Moving on through, this just talks about fixtures and exclusions, things that don't convey. Pretty much anything attached to the house does convey. If there's anything that's leased or not owned, it'll go here. Typically that's like a satellite dish maybe, or like a propane tank. Those are the big ones. Other items that do not convey, so that would be a fixture that doesn't convey. A lot of times you won't see anything here. You'll see grandma's chandelier in the dining room does not convey.
Right.
Something like that. Or mirror in the hallway does not convey, or something like that. That needs to be in there. If nothing applies, then when you write the offer, you need to put NA here. We don't leave open spaces.
Okay.
And then the personal property, so what typically comes in here is people want the appliances, right? But here's the thing, the built-in microwave, the built-in stove, all that stuff conveys. The three things that are not fixtures that people typically want are refrigerator, washer, dryer, because they're just sitting in a space, right? So if you want those, this is where you write those into the offer.
Okay.
Any questions about that?
Nope. And they can put whatever they want there, though, right? Like if
but within reason.
Lawnmower in the garage.
If you start adding things like the lawnmower, it's going to make the lender a little iffy, because sometimes that's going to bring the cost up. They're going to justify, well, you want the lawnmower, give us another $4,000, and then it doesn't appraise, and then you've got an issue. So if you've got things above and beyond the pretty standard things, we can do what's called a bill of sale, which is handled outside, just so it's not documented there. The lenders don't like to see it. It's still documented. We just don't share the bill of sale with the lender, and they don't want to see it either.
Okay.
We can handle that on a case-by-case basis.
And now let's, just for example of anything that's outside of the norm, on that bill of sale, let's say they do want the lawnmower, right? Is that something that, you type up the bill of sale, what would you put as the price for that?
You would just say, you wouldn't really put a price. You would just say,
okay. In addition to.
Right.
I gotcha. Okay.
And there's a template in dot loop. So when that comes up, let me know and I'll show you how to do it.
Okay.
But just so we don't get too far in the weeds, I'm not going to pull it out.
Yeah. Okay.
This talks about the opportunity of the due diligence process, which we talked about and I kind of explained. So with all of this stuff, I'm giving it to you in advance. And remember, there's a copy in your folder so you can read through it and feel comfortable about it. And I can answer any questions you have before it's time for us to sign it. That's why I'm doing all this now. Because when it's time to sign it, I want you to be ready to sign it and not have questions about it, in the interest of time and getting the house you want before somebody else does. At the bottom of the next page is the buyer representation. So this is where we're talking about how you're going to pay for the house. Remember how we said we have to tell them that and why it was step 2 in the home buying process? That's why it's here. So if you're getting a loan, we'll check yes, does. If you're paying cash, don't. Either way, we have to provide some proof of funds. So if you're getting a loan, the lender will provide us the letter saying that you're either approved for that property specifically or a certain amount. If you're paying cash, then I need, say, a PDF of your account, wherever that money is, or multiple accounts if you're using money from multiple accounts, that shows your name and a balance. So we can prove that you have the money on hand to pay for it.
Okay.
Again, nobody's going to review our offers without those.
Yeah.
And then if there's a specific type, we indicate that here, FHA, VA, because there's another addendum for those, or if it's just conventional or something else. You're probably always going to click fixed rate, but a lot of this stuff you don't necessarily need to handle out. Maybe 1 in 20 agents are going to ask you to fill all this out. Usually the info's in the letter, so you don't have to, right, from the lender. But you can put fixed 30 years, and then with your people that are putting 80 or 20% down, you just put 80% LTV here or whatever.
Okay.
Which that's good for them to see. That means they've got some flexibility in case something doesn't appraise or something like that.
Okay.
Because they're not borrowing 100%, which is scary for buyers and sellers.
Right.
Moving on down to the next page, this is disclosing whether or not you have to sell another property. So either yes or no, and then the address if so, and then the current status of it if you do need to sell, where it is.
Mm-hmm. So that would be the contention, that section right there.
That's why there's not a contingency addendum anymore, because the information about it is right here, and that's all it is.
Okay.
And then coming on down in your packet, and I'll show you examples in just a minute of the property owner's disclosure and the mineral and gas rights disclosure. This is just saying that, yes, you've had the opportunity to review those and initial those as part of the process. They run with every transaction. Next page is the seller representation, how long they've owned it. If it was built before 1978, if they're aware of any lead-based paint, there's another addendum in there. And then if there are any assessments that are going to be paid or planned for. Coming on down, HOA, if there's an HOA, who it is, who the contact information is, how much the dues are, and how often they're due. You can read this other, it's about taking property out, leaving the property in the condition, etc. Deed, taxes, and fees, this is where your names go, how you want them on the recorded deed, okay? And then if we're asking the seller to cover any of your expenses, this is where we do that. You know, sometimes we might say, hey, full price offer, but the seller's gonna pay $5,000 in closing costs. If we do that, this is where we put the $5,000. The only thing to remember about that is it's technically not a full price offer, even if you offer the list price and ask for $5,000 in closing costs, because the seller is paying those, so it's a reduction of their net.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Coming on down, this is about possession. Sometimes you might take possession before closing, sometimes after. I scrolled too fast. This is if we're asking the seller to provide a home warranty, or if they already are, or if that's not part of this transaction, we'll just say no.
Okay.
Here's if there are any other addenda, like the VA, FHA addenda that we talked about. If there's a bill of sale, we'd click this, identify other attorney, drafted stuff, and just put bill of sale there. Coming on down, this is where you actually sign instead of just initialing all the pages. This is where my agent or the information will go for me. I'm the seller's agent or the selling agent because I'm representing the buyer, and then the listing agent representing the seller. You're going to want to make sure you don't need to fill out any of this stuff above this right here, but everything under here needs to be filled out except for listing agent facts. And then click the appropriate box. So buyer for you, seller for the other.
Okay.
And then page 14 is the earnest money and due diligence money receipt. So again, you're going to put the seller here, the buyer here, the address here. The first two lines here and here is where you put the due diligence money.
Mm-hmm.
If the listing agent receives the due diligence, then they'll sign here. If they don't, only the buyer or only the seller will sign.
Okay.
You're going to put the earnest money amount here, and then the attorney will sign for receiving it.
Okay.
Any questions about that?
No. So if the for the due diligence, say the buyer sends the check directly to the seller, then that's when the agent wouldn't sign for the due diligence.
Correct.
However, if he
I'll
sends,
only sign it if I touch it.
yeah, right.
So
So if he sends it to the office and then redirects it to the seller, then both have to sign. If it's around, it's just the seller.
correct. That's 100% correct.
Okay.
Give me just a second. Okay, so that's the offer to purchase. The next document is the property owner's disclosure, like I talked about before. Now, in North Carolina, a seller's not required to tell you anything about their property, okay? However, most of the time they do because it seems kind of sketchy to say, I don't know anything about the property. However, you will see it sometimes when it's a foreclosed property or if the owner hasn't lived there in a while or never lived there at all.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see all these items that are being asked about beginning on the second page. and then you'll say yes, no, or no representation. So if the seller's not representing anything, then they're going to check this box concerning the site.
Hang on one second for me, Doug.
Sure.
My packet is out of order. It didn't. That's a real estate brochure. Okay.
Got it. Sorry about that. I can check the file if I need to fix it. So you've got all the questions here. Yes, no, no representation. Most of the time you're going to see yes or no. Okay. If it's yes, it means there's an issue. They'll explain it later on. If no, that's what we want to see. Okay. However, just buyer beware. Even if they say no, it doesn't mean there's not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
It means they're not aware of an issue. And that's why we have the home inspector do the home inspection. Okay.
Yeah.
So we take this with a grain of salt, but it gives us a good idea, at least what's going on. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll bring those when we see properties. So when we're looking at the property, we know the answers to these questions.
Yeah. Trust but verify.
100%.
Okay.
Well said. And then, so it's all about the house. And then if there's a HOA, that's here at the bottom. The other disclosure is the mineral oil and gas rights disclosure. So I'm sure you remember fracking in North Carolina. This came about because of that, because developers had sold the rights to a mineral oil or gas under a development and didn't let the buyers know. So now with every transaction, this is one of the disclosures. Typically, we're going to see no representation from previous because this document's only been around for 4 years now. But what we are really looking for is no on 2 and 3 and 5 and 6 if the seller hasn't severed any rights and they're not planning to before closing.
Okay.
This next addendum is lead-based paint. It only applies to homes built before 1978 because before then but since then you can't, the lead-based paint's not in use. So even if a home has lead-based paint, it's not an issue unless you start breaking down walls or getting into it, okay? And most of the time it's been painted over. So this is just the seller telling you if they're aware if there's any. Now, if it's a home that's older, you might want to have a test done so you know. Again, they're only telling you what they're aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So again, take it with a grain of salt. The next is for is the wood destroying insect addendum. In North Carolina or anywhere, buyers pay for their own inspections except for VA buyers. The seller must pay for the pest inspection. Okay? So that's a given, but a lot of times with VA loans, we will ask for the seller to provide a transferable termite bond on the home that you can renew. Now, it doesn't have to be for a whole year after closing. It just means there's one in place that you can renew, which means it's cheaper than getting one from the start. So if you're a VA buyer, we'll use this.
Okay.
And just FYI, this really only applies at the coast. We don't use it in the triangle.
Okay.
This is some information about purchasing coastal real estate in North Carolina, just because we have hurricane season every year. It's just good to know. Nothing you really need to sign or anything, but just as an FYI, and I wanted to share it with you all. The next is a coastal hazard addendum. If we buy a beach property or waterfront property, we'll sign this, just disclosing the address and if it's in a flood zone or not. Okay?
Okay.
And then at the very end, congratulations. You're under contract. We're going to make this happen. We secured the contract. That's only half the battle. And now my team and I are here to lead you through the rest of it. This is just an FYI or a reminder about what comes next. The next step is I'm going to introduce you to April, who's our closing manager, and she handles all the inter-office stuff. She's going to set up closing with the attorney. She's going to set up the inspections and everything. She's going to make sure all the paperwork's where it's needed to be and keep us on track. I'm still your primary point of contact, but she's another resource. Just a reminder, I'm not just an individual agent out here working for you. Our whole team is here and have your back. Any questions?
Does April do that?
She does.
Okay.
Absolutely. And she'll be sending out intro emails to them to say who she is. There's a pending drip in Boomtown, which I'll make sure when we get to Boomtown is set up for you. So as soon as you move somebody to pending, it sends an email out with her video in there as an introduction.
Okay.
For the people from her. So they have a face with a name. And everything.
Where does she work?
She lives in Holly Springs.
Where's that at?
15 minutes from me.
Okay.
It's south of Raleigh.
Okay.
But April went to Dixon. She grew up in Sneads Ferry, and we went to high school together. She's a year older than me. So, and she's been in real estate for a while. I worked with her at a previous company.
Okay. Is it just the agents that were at the office the other day?
Yes, that's
Okay.
the only full-time. I've got three other that have their license on with me, but they just work with friends and family. So they're not part of all this.
I
other
got you.
stuff.
Okay.
So for the purpose of this recording, for other people that use it later on, I'm going to stop the recording real quick. So just give me a minute to do that, and then we can keep talking. I just got to figure out how to do it.